In this tutorial, we're going to turn this basic hair color into a procedural hair shader like this. Also, this procedural anime hair shader works with both Cycles and Eevee. The only thing you need is a hair mesh that isn't too flat, since we'll be using normal data. Also, you don't really need a perfect topology, but a better one will definitely give you nicer result. So, to summarize, first we make the front hair mask and then we make the back hair mask, both of them using different methods. Then we combine them into a single mask. Then we apply some base color. After that, we add top-down highlight effect. Then for the finishing touch, we add some static specular effect. Lastly, I'll show you some variant settings, so hopefully you get the general idea. Okay, let's go. First, add a texture coordinate node, then take the normal output and connect it to a mapping node. From the mapping node, we only need one direction, so we separate the vector and use the z-axis. This let us see the normal data in the up and down direction. Now we can control this using the mapping node. We can rotate it to change the direction of the data, move it or offsetting it using the location values, and adjust the scale to control how wide the gradient is. Next, let's add a color ramp, so we have more control over the gradient. I'll set the interpolation to ease, then move the white handle to the left and the black handle a bit to the right. Now you can adjust these settings as you see fit. You don't have to use the same settings as me. Once everything looks good, frame these nodes and name them something like front hair mask. This helps keep the shader organized, and later if we want to tweak something about the front hair, we'll know exactly where to look. Now for the next part, if you have this kind of hair shape or surface, we are going to use dot product method. But if you don't have this kind of surface, you can skip this part. Or you can try apply this method to your hair, even if the shape is different. Okay, first let's prepare some space here. Then let's add some texture coordinate again and take the generate output into the mapping node. Then normalize it. This is basically convert the generated vector output into direction. Then let's add another mapping node, but now use the normal output. Now we can add the dot product node, plug the normalized generated vector and the normal map vector. Let's plug the dot product value output to the principal BSDF color to see what happens. As you can see, when we try modify all of the mapping node, we can see some curvature effect on the surface. So that was basically what the dot product do. Let's add another helper node after the dot product, like color ramp. Next, I'm going to flip the black and white handles into something like this. Then we're going to change the mode into B-spline. Why? Because in my experience, this mode is great at preserving a lot of very smooth curvature. Now, because we are using the B-spline mode, the expected output result is going to be a very smooth curvature. So, to sharpen it, we need another helper node, that is math power operation. At this point, all we gotta do is tweak the value on the mapping node, color ramp, and the power node. The point is, try to make your mesh show curvature effect as much as possible. This is my sample settings, so you get the idea about those values. The value is basically pretty sensitive, so any quite small value will affect the result. So yeah, try your best, but don't overdo it. If you are satisfied with the result, frame this node and label it something like back hair mesh. Now that we have back and front hair mask, let's combine them. Unplug this for a second and let's use the space above this front mask group. We will be using y-axis coordinate as the base mask. Again, add a texture coordinate, use the generated and plug it into the mapping node. We're using generated because it's using the object space, not the direction of surface facing. Let's continue by adding the separate XYZ node because we just want the y-axis. My front and back mesh parts are aligned along the y-axis, so I choose the y-axis. Let's plug it into color ramp so we can control their gradient. Then plug the color ramp output to the principal BSDF color to just see what happened. With this gradient, now we can just point where the back and the front part using the color ramp handles. Also, you can adjust the mapping node to fit the rotation or any other things. Yep, this means I tell Blender that my front part is the black color and the back part is the white color. If you're satisfied with the masking, frame it and name it. I'm just going to name it front and back separate mask. Now we just need to assign both our front hair mask and back hair mask to this separate mask. Since this is a black and white or 0 and 1 data, we can just use matte float mix node. Plug the separate mask to the mix factor input. Now this gives us all black color. This is because the mix A and B input is 0. That means it's black color. We can just change one of them to 1 so we can see where is the front and the back part. So mix A input is the front and the B input is the back. We can just plug its mask into its corresponding input. Now we can tweak the separate mask however we like. Okay, let's color the hair, but first let's make some space here. We are going to use a mix color node. It works just like a mix float node, but for colors. Now you can decide whatever color you want. Personally, I'm going to use dark color on slot A and bright color on slot B. Now this part is optional, but I like adding another mix color node in overlay mode and blending it with a bright low saturation color. No specific reason, I just think it looks nicer. After you're satisfied with the result, let's frame it and name it again. I'm going to name it base hair coloring. Now this step is just additional effect, so this is optional. We'll adding an top to bottom highlight gradient effect to the hair. Let's add some texture coordinate, then take the normal output and plug it into the mapping node. We use the normal output, so the highlight effect follows the hair surface, so it's almost like a lighting effect. The next thing is we just need to separate the mapping output vector and then take the z-axis data into color ramp. Then let's plug the color ramp output into principal BSDF base color to just see what happened. Now we just need to tweak the settings to make it looks like a light comes from top to bottom. I am also like to add more handles into the color ramp just to make the gradient looks not too linear. By the way, for more variation, feel free to do this to your previous or next color ramp mask. This step is optional, so I want to add a value to enable or disable the effect. We can do this using a math node set to multiply. Then add a value node and rename it something like highlight intensity. Also, you can think of this value as opacity as well. Okay, so that's everything for this part. Let's frame it and name it main highlight. Now we just need to turn this mask into the actual effect. We can do that by using a mix color node with the overlay operation again. Then set the input slot B color to some high value but not full. And that's it for this part. This is another optional effect, so we'll be adding a static specular highlight. We'll take the normal output from the texture coordinate node and isolate the z vector using a separate xyz node. Now this is the new part. We take the z output and plugged it into a math node set to absolute. I'll explain what this does in a moment, but first let's connect the output to a color ramp and then plug it into principal BSDF color. If I select the absolute node and press M to mute it, you will see that the result looks like the usual z-vector data we saw previously. Usually, black color means 0 and white color means 1, especially if the raw input was clamped. But in this case, the values actually rank from negative to positive, roughly from negative 1 to 1. When we apply the absolute operation, any negative values are converted into positive, while 0 remains unchanged. Next, I'm going to make the black line into white. Just switch the color ramp handles here. Okay, this is already starting to look like a decent specular highlight, but we still need a mask to break the effect up into a zebra-like pattern. So again, down here, let's add another mapping node and a separate XYZ node. Then connect the X output into the principal BSDF color to just see what happens. Now this gradient is the one we're looking for. We just need to make the gradient repeating, like tiling. We can do that by using cosine operation. So plug the X output into a cosine math node. So what's actually happening is when we increase the raw mapping scale beyond 1, we are effectively increasing the number of cosine waves. You can just simply scale it until it looks right. But if you want to match the mapping scale, you have to multiply the input by constant tau. Basically, convert the input into radians for cosine to works. Okay, that's enough for the explanation. So, at first, it looks like nothing is happening. That's because the mapping scale on the x-axis or any axis needs to be higher than 1. There you go, the zebra pattern. Now, after we change it, I'm going to add math subtract node to control the individual cosine line thickness. Subtract affect the line thickness because the thickness is driven by a gradient. That gradient is a continuous range of float values. When we subtract that values, we shift this gradient, which changes where the threshold falls. The subtraction is also possible to give us negative values. We can prove it by using the absolute. Now, to avoid that, we just need to enable the clamp. As you can see, the white part of this gradient isn't fully white, and that's expected. The original values were already close to 1, so after subtracting, they no longer reach full white. To fix this, we multiply the values. So any value as long as it's not 0 or lower will increase the result. Also, enable the clamp, just to prevent getting higher result than 1. The next is I'm going to add color ramp to just have control the gradient interpolation. Then I'm going to adjust it a little bit. Then we multiply this color ramp with this color ramp. This will combine both masks to what we need. There you go, the hair specular almost finished. I'm going to add another multiply and a value node to control their intensity and opacity. About the clamp on these two multiply, it's actually optional. I just want to be safe with the result. Let's frame it and name it. I'm going to name it hair specular. Now, to add this mask into our main color, we can use color dodge. Plug it into the vector input, then plug the main color into the slot A. For the slot B, I'm just going to give it a high value color but low saturation. So that's it for this part. Now, for some of you skip the back hair part, this is the setup that's possible for you to follow. So the settings are, it's just exactly the same way as the front hair. The difference is just the value settings. It's also possible to just have only the front hair mask. So no separate mask and back mask, which is much simple. Also about these shaders, I encourage you to explore different settings. You might find a result that works even better than mine. Okay, that's all from me. Hope you learned something new. Cheers!